Hello, welcome to Channel Zero TV with John and John. I'm John,
And I'm John.
and tonight we're going to bring you something a little bit different, some actual home movies of DC superheroes on water skis. John, do you want to tell people what they are about to observe?
Well, this was the water ski show at SeaWorld of Orlando in Florida and also SeaWorld of Ohio. I believe it's in Cincinnati, if I'm not mistaken. And they had at one point something like 23 different DC Comics characters on water skis, doing very elaborate stunts, doing hang gliding, powerboat races, all sorts of stuff in these artificial lagoons that the SeaWorlds had on the premises of the aquarium.
So, fortunately, somebody shot some home movies of one of these shows, and that's what we're about to share with you, and we'll be back right afterwards to talk about it. John, you actually attended this show in the 70s. Can you tell everybody what you saw?
Yeah, I was in Orlando on a trip with my family in 1978, and it was the usual sort of Disney World, family trip. I just wandered across the street one day into SeaWorld, and I knew they were doing this show, and I was just, really sort of idly curious about it, being, a lifelong comic book fan like many people. And I saw the show out in the artificial lagoon in the back. It was very well constructed from a stunt point of view. There were powerboat races. There was a hang gliding entrance. There's all sorts of water ski stunts. It was emceed by an actor playing as Jimmy Olsen, and that person was on microphone. He was there to sort of keep the narrative going, cover up any mistakes or accidents that happened out on the lagoon, things like that. Whenever the characters have to come up on the beach and interact in terms of dialogue, it was always they were lip syncing, as I recall, to pre-recorded dialogue that came in over the PA system, because mostly these water skiers, they're basically water sports enthusiasts. From what I can see from the interview material I've read subsequently, they're all kind of like, they're jocks. They're jocks. They just love getting out there on like the jet ski and doing stuff like that. They're not really actors or stunt people for the most part.
And SeaWorld would do these shows all the time, right? But they would not necessarily be themed or narrative driven, or they might be narrative driven, but certainly not with familiar characters like this.
Oh yeah, no, this was a fairly elaborate undertaking. From what I can determine, that they optioned something like 23 separate DC characters. Some of them pretty obscure. You've got Aquaman, but you've also got Mera and, Batgirl and Black Canary, et cetera, et cetera. They were, in this with both feet, so to speak.
They also optioned a bunch of villains. We saw sort of Joker and then the Riddler and Penguin, so the classic Batman villains, which fans of the 1960s TV show would remember. But if I recall, also some obscure villains. I think Mordru, Galactic Wizard. Did I spot Weather Wizard in there somewhere, or Captain Cold?
Yeah, Captain Cold. I mean, they like I said, I mean, they just optioned. They had Catwoman. For some strange reason, Lois Lane was somewhere in the narrative, but she was purely used as comic relief. She was always sort of coming in on a powerboat that was out of control and going up and off a ramp, off a jump, on and on and on, stuff like that. For some reason, she was being used, just completely to get laughs.
And Superman would then rescue her with his powerboat, which is, of course, what Superman needs to rescue somebody.
That that's the great existential mystery of the DC superheroes water ski show. Why does Superman or Wonder Woman like need a powerboat to win a race? But I mean, this is an artifact from a completely different world, because I mean, this was something, completely geared to like families and children. And it was during an era when the assumption was that DC Comics was that their audience was about 6 to 12 years old. And all of the sort of properties that they were optioning, cartoons, water ski shows, things like that, were aimed at that market. And that market is not going to question like why Flash needs a powerboat.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good point that I think this was just around the time the first Superman movie came out,
Right.
and that had slightly more adult themes, but it was still sort of aimed for kids. But it was really before Batman, the Michael Keaton Batman, where you started having superheroes sort of breaking into adult genres, and certainly, obviously, the Marvel universe now dominates. So these characters are hot properties. People would not rent them out for a water ski show or some of the other kind of ludicrous things they did with them back in the 70s.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Well, I mean, just looking at this lineup here, every single one of these characters in the first row there is tied up in a feature film option, and all the female characters in the second row are probably tied up in various TV show options. So I mean, the notion that you would even be able to go to DC Comics and say, I want to do a water ski show for kids at SeaWorld using the DC canonical superheroes, you'd be laughed out of that office.
The period piece I remember from this era was the Hanna-Barbera production of Legends of the Superheroes, which a lot of people know because it was the last performance by Adam West and Burt Ward as Batman and Robin. But that was a kind of completely low budget, over the top production of first a sort of Super Friends, Legion of Doom kind of battle between the Justice League and a sort of ragtag collection of supervillains, including Frank Gorshin, who played the Riddler. But then the second episode in the 2 episode series was a roast hosted by Ed McMahon of the superheroes, again with like the same characters. That was probably rock bottom in the DC Universe licensing.
Yeah, we definitely need to do a podcast about those two shows. We need to sort of devote some time to that because I'm led to understand that the backstory there is really, really very interesting. That's another one that I saw in real time on TV, and I remember being all of about 16 years old and just scratching my head, in wonderment as whose crazy idea this was,
Right, and in fact, I believe it included footage from the water show. I think there was a scene where Mordru, the most powerful wizard in the universe, was trying to escape on a jet ski, kind of chased by Batman and Robin.
You might be right. We'll have to do some research on that. I mean, it's a different world. I mean, they just assumed that was nothing but elementary school children are watching this, and we can get away with with this kind of foolishness.
Right. Well, although that doesn't explain Ghetto Man, a topic for another time.
Oh yeah, that is definitely another podcast in and of itself.
Well, thanks for joining us down this trip down memory lane, and we will be back with more episodes as we careen towards episode 25, which is going to be celebrating our 25 years with Channel Zero. So more to come. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Channel Zero.